So what is this going to look like? Well, the Biden plan right now calls for $1,400 for individuals who make up to $75,000 and married couples who make up to $100,000. But Republicans say this needs to be more targeted. It has to go, they say, to the people who need it the most. So they're proposing lowering that amount from $1,400 to $1,000 for anybody making under $40,000. If you make over $50,000, well, under the Republican plan, the checks would disappear completely. Now, we heard from Maryland Republican Congressman Andy.
We finally have some breaking news around the fourth stimulus check, and now they've released a new announcement on the United States economy. Americans are finally ready to see the financial relief at the grocery store and gas stations. But lawmakers are insisting that the government set aside more stimulus for retirees and seniors, and I definitely agree because stimulus payments are necessary. Many lawmakers and economists are looking at Joe Biden's sweeping stimulus package and its impact on the country. The American Rescue Plan Act, which cost a whopping $1.9 trillion, had a slew of provisions tucked into it and help battle the fallout of the crisis and plug holes in the social safety net. One of them is the Lewis Act, and this legislation was meant to shore up the finances of multi-employer pension plans, which are responsible for providing benefits to the retirees. And before the American Rescue Plan was signed into law, many plans were in a financial crisis. Beforehand, the House Education on House Committee and Labor warned that failing plans will enable to help the people who need benefits the most and they're owed to retirees, and that the funding for this program that helped so many Americans was running low. But now, according to the White House, insurance programs are estimated to become insolvent by 2026. It leaves around millions of people without the benefits that they had accrued through their careers. And a White House fact sheet had stated that in the latest cash infusion from the rescue plan, $36 billion went to the Central States Pension Fund, safeguarding 350,000 Teamster workers and retirees, including truck drivers and warehouse workers, from cutting to their benefits. So it's not the only proactive measure that the Biden administration has taken up to shore up American finances when they retire. The president had released a plan to address climate costs, draining retirement funding, and also their savings account. But now the relief in the pension comes to Republicans' potentially eye cuts to security. Social Security that is, another major social safety net for the elderly and retirees. Social Security is already cash strapped. So many experts are worried about the future of the program. And also, this Thursday, Chuck Schumer was reelected by his caucus to lead Democrats for a second term. It happened during a private meeting in the Capitol as the caucus chose to keep most of the pre-existing leadership team intact. In the wake of a better-than-expected midterm election, Democrats attained majority of the House and the Senate. Only Senator Patty Murray of Washington, who will be the president for a while, will not serve on the leadership team anymore, after serving in the number of years, and now it's time for him to retire. But Chuck Schumer, on the other hand, and the rest of the leadership were unanimously elected by the Senate Democratic Caucus to serve again in Congress. The election comes as the party won a slim 2-seat majority over GOP in the 118th Congress, after Warnock held his seat in Congress earlier this year. This will be the first Congress in which Chuck Schumer will hold the majority again, and where Kamala Harris will be able to step in to break some ties and help Democrats pass the bills they need to pass. For instance, stimulus bills. And also, Democrats re-elected the senators to in top leadership roles, and including Senator Dick Durbin as a majority whip. This year has been defined by the economy as a cycle of record spending. But it appears that record high inflation is not stopping Americans from spending money. Everybody has also caused the CEO of JP Morgan Chase to warn that all this spending is leading to less in Americans' bank accounts. It's a potential sign that a recession might be on the horizon. Another sign that could be pointing to recession is the labor market, which is showing signs of softening as both initial and continuing jobless claims continue to rise. It's something that the Fed has been trying to avoid while rising rates to curb inflation. Economists are just keeping an eye on this because of November's Producer Price Index Friday, a report that shows how much retailers raised prices to keep up with inflation. It could set the tone for how high the Fed interest rate will be next Wednesday. Experts also predict that the Producer Price Index grew 0.2% last month after leveling out in October, but they still project it to be low enough to keep the Fed from making its fifth straight 75 basis point hike. Nearly 80% of economists expect the Fed to issue a 25 to 50 basis point jump next week as the Fed works to wrangle high prices. So now the economy was a top issue for voters this year, but things are slowing down and holiday season is approaching, so we're now waiting for Joe Biden to do more for the American people and send out stimulus payments because it's time for him to do this.
Not just for Africa. I've been engaged in these issues going back to my days as a young man in the United States Senate. When I was on the Foreign Relations Committee, I was chairman of the African Affairs Subcommittee and got to spend a lot of time in Africa. I visited almost all of your countries. When I was vice president serving with President Obama, we hosted the first U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit, including U.S.-Africa Business Forum. We saw so clearly the enormous potential that we could harness if we did it together. And holding the first of its kind summit in 2014 was a watershed moment to cement new kinds of partnerships between our nations. Partnerships not to create political obligation, or foster dependence, but to spur shared success. And I emphasize shared success and opportunity. Because when Africa succeeds, the United States succeeds. Quite frankly, the whole world succeeds as well. Now, 8 years later, the world has undergone a great many changes. We're still grappling with the deadly pandemic, facing down war and instability, addressing economic challenges with global impact, fighting rising food prices, tackling the impacts of climate change. And each of these crises has only heightened the vital role African nations and peoples play to address the global challenges that drive our global progress. We can't solve any of these challenges without African leadership at the table. And I'm not trying to be nice.
There is an update on $2,000 stimulus payments, everybody. The city of Austin will be the first major Texas city to use local tax dollars to give cash to low-income families to keep them housed as the cost of living skyrockets in the capital city. Under a year-long $1 million program that cleared a key Austin City Council vote this week, the city will send monthly checks of $1,000 to people in need and risk at losing their homes. Officials say that this is an attempt to insulate low-income residents from Austin's increasingly expensive housing market and prevent more people from becoming homeless. During a press conference, the mayor said, "We can find people moments before they end up on our streets that divert them from being there." 8 Austin City Council members voted to establish the Guaranteed Income Pilot Program. Austin joins at least 28 U.S. cities like Chicago and Los Angeles that have tried some form of guaranteed income. Empty baby formula shelves, everybody, and predictions of widespread $6 gallon gasolines and coming food shortages are some of the issues that are facing people right now. Yet there's a growing sense of crisis piling on crisis. A CNN poll released this week showed that most Americans are worried about how things are going. Yet for all the gloom, this is also a time of strange duality in the economy that in many ways has bounced back well from crisis shutdowns. The jobless rate is near 50-year lows, new claims for U.S. unemployment benefits unexpectedly rose last week, but the labor market remains tight amid worker shortages.